Hey folks, Deadly here, and I'm excited to talk a bit about the new Guild Quest. What characters I think will shine the most, those who maybe lost or were diminished somewhat. For the record, if you saw my previous video, I did barely clear it with an all-SP team, but when I switched in my 5/5 Orihime, as opposed to, so I switched out, in that case, the 7th Annie Ichigo, I was able to clear it with like 17 seconds remaining as opposed to just 4 or 5. So NAD characters, especially those with a boost, have received an increase in their value. I could have used I have 4 or 5 7th Annie Ichigo, so he would have done just about as well as this Noelle. Maybe a slight tad bit less damage because he doesn't get the extra damage to status ailment enemies, but maybe he would have made up for it by paralyzing enemies more often. Now that's already giving you a preview for how some of the calculations have changed regarding the value of certain characters. So let's talk about that. Let's look in the album just so we have characters that aren't built out, so we can look at their skills, just naked stats and skills. By the way, I took a big 1-year break, and for that reason, my album is really spotty. I started again with this 1000-Year Blood War banner, so I did miss 8th anniversary. I pulled White and 8th Annie Ichigo from tickets, which was very nice. That's why I do have some of the premium characters here, including the Quincy Ichigo, which was just a massive upset for me to get that. I was so excited. But if I go further down, you'll see I've been playing BBS for a while. I have almost every other character in the game. It's just the new characters where there's some spottiness. Well, there's some spottiness everywhere, but a lot of gaps up here. I've also missed some of the most crucial banners. I would say the most crucial banners are this Burn the Witch banner here, as we'll discuss, and of course the Ataru banner. All right, let's jump into it. I want to start by talking about nukers because, of course, their value has diminished somewhat. That said, when you look at what each individual nuker that we've gotten brings to the table, many of them are just as valuable, and I'll explain why. So for Noelle and Yama, you have the Vortex. We'll see that keeping people in place is incredibly important. Having a 960, 630 homing Vortex is critical. They also get 80% extra damage to status ailment enemies on top of having weakening, so 130% total, meaning even though they have Berserker 40 with Frenzy 1, they're gonna be doing a ton of damage once they hit that status ailment, and they'll get it quite frequently with their Vortex. So they will be doing still big damage, and that helps to offset a bit what they've lost on the nuke, meaning they can only nuke through one wave now, but at least they have some additional multipliers they have access to in addition to the SP80 boost that'll make them viable even against some of the most broken characters in the game in terms of strong attack damage. So don't count them out. They're still great characters, even if they can't bomb all the way to the end. Now, on that note, Mayuri, for example, who can't bomb to the end, doesn't have the Vortex. So does he lose out? No, this Mayuri, if anything, his value is like slightly higher, maybe not slightly higher, but you might be able to use him without him being 5/5. The reason for that is he has paralysis on his strong attacks, and his third strong attack will trap and inflict that paralysis guaranteed. That is so powerful. He'll get the poison and the paralysis off, then he'll benefit from the 80% extra damage, and as I'll talk about, the spiritual pressure boost is more important than ever now because you need to bypass the enemy's defense. To do that, you need high SP and high attack, and the most important part of any bomber, and he is of course a bomber, will be his weakened defense. So the bombardment is less important nowadays. Being able to debuff the enemy is incredibly important. So all three of those characters I mentioned, Yama, Noelle, and Mayuri, have the weakened defense and tons of extra damage to status ailment enemies, and between a Vortex and Paralyze, they have a way to stop the enemy. That is why some of the older bombers have lost out. And I hate to say this, I used a special move source on my speed Noelle, so it's not wasted, but she's not as good as she was. Neither is Balgo in Atsushi, although he makes up for it because of the niche he plays. I'm looking for these characters, I'm sorry. 8th anniversary Ichigo has the Vortex and he has paralysis. So even though he doesn't have weakened defense, this guy will remain a key character in your account. He is going to be great for this guild quest. Where are these other characters? My goodness. Am I losing my mind? Where's Christmas Noelle? There she is. So she has bombardment and then the 80% SP boost. 80% SP boost is good, but because she only has weakened, again, value is a bit down. If she had had weakened defense, that would have helped a lot more, I think, so she could stack weakened defense, so as it is, and then she doesn't have the Vortex and she has a range collision attack hit. So she's lost a bit of value. The same can be said for Asazero. Where is he? This guy. Again, no way to stop the enemy, freeze him in place, and he doesn't have a built-in weakened defense. Now, they're still great characters because of the SP80 boost, which is almost critical in this guild quest, but they are the ones that have suffered the most compared to the previous guild quest. Now, Roka, actually, even though she's not a bomber, is pretty sweet. Character I think that has gained a bit in value just because it's more important to keep enemies stationary, and she has the SP boost. So any character with that SP 80 boost has gained a lot of value, and if they have a way to freeze enemies in place, either through a vortex or a status ailment, they've gained even more. So I would say this Mayuri here, we'll talk about in a second, is also incredibly critical. He's got the paralysis, and he has the immobilizer - contaminator, so he will proc relatively often. He also, as we'll see, has a very good, and he has the SP 80 boost, very good killer, so he fills a niche. We'll talk about that in a second. So that's it about nukers. They're still great just because of the other skills they have. It's only really, I would argue, Noelle and Asha Zero that have lost a bit of value. Also this Toshiro, but Toshiro has freeze, and he's not a nuker in the traditional sense, so Toshiro I'd say is still really good. He also has very niche killers. So that might be the next thing to talk about. Let's talk about killers. Who has gained a huge boost just because of the killer they have? For example, this Noelle wasn't really needed because we have 7th Annie Ichi, so her killer wasn't super helpful in this case. We also have Aizen, 6th Annie Aizen, so we have great SP characters in that category. But there are others who really gained. Now, you know what? As a nuker, Bambi, by the way, she is still incredible. I missed her. Bambi's amazing because of her bomb second strong attack. As long as she can, position the enemy well and maybe get that enemy frozen, my goodness, she is what we needed. Yes, she'll nuke through an entire wave, but she'll also do so much damage to single target. So Bambi remains an absolute powerhouse. She wasn't devalued that much. Okay. So the other thing I want to mention were these niche killers, right? Things like Melee Captain. Yeah, True's going to be amazing. Of course, we already knew that. But there's others I really want to highlight here. The big ones, I argue, would be, well, actually, we'll talk about NAD characters later. Balgo Natsushi. This guy gives you range Quincy and range human. Now, in range human, we do technically have the Tech Quincy Ichigo, but you could possibly use him as a side unit and use Balgo as well. Now, Balgo isn't really going to be used so much for his bombardment here, although it will help him get through a particular wave, but we have very few good range Quincy main SP characters, so he is very valuable. The fact that you can use him for 2 of these weeks where we really don't have that many good options, I mean, outside of course, Tech Ichigo for human, who's a big one, but you don't have many secondary SP units then, and then range Quincy, this is your best bet right here. So Balgo has gained a lot. He's got the SP 80 boost, which we like. Yes, he's got status ailments. He doesn't have a way to freeze the enemy. He doesn't have a vortex or a good status ailment in that regard, but he just makes up for it for the fact that he is such a good killer combo with the 80% SP boost. Now, one of the best characters in the game now, I would argue, due to her usability in Guild Quest, is this Macy. I am so angry I missed this banner. I wish I had played back in the day just so I could have hit this banner. Her combo of range no affiliation and range squad 0 is amazing. Let's look at no affiliation. Well, let's look at her stats and skills first. This character is the perfect Guild Quest character. So she has basically the same kit as the new Noelle. The difference is she has Frenzy 2. So she's going to be doing 50% more damage on her strong attacks. Where she loses is her Soul Bomb, where she does 60% less damage because she doesn't have bombardment, she only has devastation. But she has built-in weakened defense, which I'm going to argue again, it's more valuable. You can just not nuke the whole wave, but super, reduce the defense with 2 weakened defense stacks. And she has weaken, of course. And she has paralysis. I forgot about paralysis. My God, she is so good. Your NAD characters will completely eradicate that last boss if that's who you nuke, so you don't even need the nuke. And then the rest of the time where you're relying on your SAs more, she's doing 50% more damage. She's got the Frenzy 2 as opposed to Frenzy 1 with Berserker 40. And the SP boost, of course. And then to top it all off, she's got the niche killers. Both no affiliation, range no affiliation. Yes, you have 8th Annie Ichi, the power one, but she's going to way out damage him because she has the SP boost and she has the extra damage, the 80% extra damage to status ailment enemies. And then range squad 0, are you kidding me? Okay, the one competition, I guess, would be the Speed Aizen, and I hope I pull him because if I don't pull Macy, he's really my only bet. That Speed Aizen, by the way, is not terrible. We'll talk about him too, but Macy is the queen, guys. Right now, I'd argue she's probably one of the most valuable units in the entire game. She got a major boost with this new Guild Quest. I love that there are always, almost always, premium alternatives, so if you don't have her, like I don't, I can still cross my fingers and hope that I pull this Aizen, who doesn't have a way to freeze enemies, but he does have essentially 100% Berserker, so he's doing more damage even than somebody with Frenzy 2 Berserker 40, and then he's got the SP boost. So this Aizen is also going to be a really good main SP unit for that range squad 0, so I would say his value has popped up a lot too. Remember, we now have range squad 0 dash human killer as one guild quest, and then the other guild quest is Quincy Sternritter. That does mean, by the way, Balgo and Atsushi is a little bit less valuable now that I think about it on his human killer because Macy can replace him. So Macy kind of took a little bit of value away from Balgo, but Balgo still has range Quincy on lockdown. Okay, Bruno's even valuable too. There aren't that many melee Espada character killers. It's going to be Bruno, and he's still good. I think gauge effects are more valuable than ever, by the way. His gauge is going to be amazing. And his gauge is here going to be much better than even Ninny's because there aren't that many enemies from which to get that gauge rampage build up. But he has, the recharge when he gets the gauge, meaning he has more strong attacks. He'll use those strong attacks to refill his gauge, and he'll get the gauge even more than Macy. So this Bruno is also incredibly valuable. Double killers with super high output on the gauge, and he doesn't have to build up that damage using like the rampage skill. So Kilgay is going to be very valuable too, but he doesn't build it up right away, same as Yachiru. And the SP boost he gets guaranteed. And because there are enemies of different status ailments, different attributes, the status ailment specific boosts are going to be a little less effective. He doesn't need it. He gets a 50% SP boost as soon as he procs his gauge. So my gosh, this banner was amazing. This was the best Guild Quest banner that'll ever release. And if they come back out with it this month, I'm going all in. I never got any of the characters. I'm just going to cross my fingers. I could right now go back in on the main banner right now, the Halloween banner, and guarantee myself a 5-5 Ninny and a 5-5 Noelle. And yet I am not going to do that because I would rather get these other characters. I already have a 4-5 Ninny now and a 3-5 Noelle. So I'd rather just get these other characters. Pretty much guarantee myself. Nothing's a guarantee. I can guarantee the 5-5 Ninny, and hopefully I pull 2 more copies with the other guy. So anyway, so they got a huge boost. If you don't have Bruno, like I don't have, well, then you better just hope you have this Mayuri. He was on the 8th anniversary summons, which again, I wasn't here for that, so I don't have him, but he would do the job almost as well. He's got the 80% Berserker. It's 40% Berserker. 80% comes from the FSD at full stam. He then has... not FSD, it's strong attack damage at full stam. He also has increased damage to afflicted enemies, which is awesome. He has, 2 very good status ailments, especially, one very good status ailment, the paralysis, and he has a status ailment spiritual pressure boost, so he's going to be hitting hard. This character is amazing for Espada. I can't believe it. My best melee Espada killer will be the Power 1000 Year Blood War Rukia. So I'm in trouble for melee Espada week. I'll leave it at that. Other people with kind of niche combos for killers that could be very helpful is right here, the range Quincy Yoruichi. I actually summoned for her on the E-Dread, or E-Burn banner, and I got cucked really hard, so I didn't get her, but she's vital because she's the only booster for range Quincy killer. She also has paralysis, which is perfect. She even gets a heal off on that second strong attack. She is amazing. Yes, she only has Berserker 40, and because she's a range killer, she won't do damage with her boost, but honestly, she makes up for it so much more. She's got a heal, she's got a booster skill, and she does paralysis, so hopefully she can freeze the enemies a bit for you. I keep saying freeze. Freeze is its own status ailment. Paralyze them, whatever. Stop them from moving. So she is, again, jump in power, and I don't have her. As you're noticing here, I'm missing many of the key characters simply because I haven't played in a while. All right, I would say again, like any character with that vortex is going to be valuable. So even somebody like Kaname, no range, no affiliation. We don't have that many great characters. Of course, you have the 8th anniversary Ichigo, who might be a little bit better, but if you've got this guy duped out, he'll still outperform the Ichigo. Because he's got, Berserker 40, or does he not even have Berserker 20? Sorry, I thought yes, he does. He's Berserker 20 with Frenzy 2, so he's only doing 33% less damage at base than that Ichigo, but if you've got dupes into this Kaname, he'll be better. All right, well, that's where we're at. In Kaname, I think he also has, he just has Drain. But, that's fine. He doesn't have the weaken that Ichigo does, so maybe the power Ichigo is just a tad bit better. Now, Toshiro is another character that got a massive bump. Melee Soul Reaper actually needs him. He's got freeze. He's got a gauge. He's got the SP boost, and bombardment just to add it, even though bombardment's been devalued a bit. I mean, this character, and shared complete status immunity. Guys, this Tosh is now more valuable, I would argue, than the Tech Ichigo that people used to comp him to. This guy can stop people with his strong attacks, and between Gauge and the SP boost, he will be doing massive damage. And again, strong attack damage is prioritized nowadays over your bomb. So this guy, 100% Berserker, plus then he gets another 100% Berserker and 80% SP boost. I mean, and it gets his strong attacks back faster when he hits that Gauge. Toshiro is going to be shredding. Absolutely shredding. The most important thing for me is that he's got two killers, one of which is Melee Squad Zero, and we desperately need Melee Squad Zero characters. He will be your SP main, your best bet for Melee Squad Zero. Melee Soul Reaper, I can't remember who his big competition is. Obviously, you have White Ichigo, but I'm going to say this now, I think this Ichigo will outperform White in GQ right now. First of all, you can freeze, as I mentioned, but second of all, he's got the Gauge, and he'll be proccing that Gauge quite a bit. So don't sleep on that Tosh. He's your best bet. I only have one copy of him. I wish I had more copies, but there's some other weird ones, like, for example, this Yama in Melee Human. There aren't that many great Melee Human SP characters, and you could pretty easily build a no status ailment team here. You could, for example, use the Senkaimon Tatsuki. I have two of them 5/5. I'm sure you guys have at least one of them 5/5. Use her as your booster, then bring in this Yama. And then there was one other Melee Human killer that I'm forgetting now, but you can get 3 non-status ailment enemies. The problem is I just don't know if you'll do enough damage. Like, if you do enough damage, you're good, but you have to kill him fast because you have no way of stopping your enemy. So that's a big question mark. I'm going to test it with the 1000-Year Blood War Ichigo. I have him 5/5 for Melee or Rancor. I think I'm going to just see how I do. Melee, no affiliation too, but it may not work out so well. All right, so those are some of the big ones. I think I probably missed one or two. Again, this Ichigo, his stocks have risen too. Range Hollow, we do have quite a few characters, but that Range Human, he's going to lock down together with Balgo. Yeah, I mean, really, some of these, again, this is another character that has the 100% extra damage for Captain. You could stack him with somebody like the 1000-Year Blood War Ichigo, and somebody else for Melee Captain. I don't know, it'd have to be no status ailment, so that might work out. I don't know. And then we got stuff like this Dordoni, who's always been valuable for his Espada killer, but he's even more valuable now, I would argue, because we're back to really needing the boosts to rely on those. We can't just nuke anymore, so he's even more important. All right, I'm probably missing at least one of the other, now they're more valuable because of their killers. I mean, obviously this Yukio, but I'm going to save this Yukio, this Range Espada, for when we talk about NAD characters, because as I was going to mention, they've gotten a massive buff. So let's just move on to that, I would say. Let's move on to that. I'll do a quick scan to see if there's any major one that I missed. This Shinji could be interesting, but we'll talk about him when we talk about debuffs. Actually, yeah, let's talk about debuffs first. So what about some strong attack types that are now more valuable than they've ever been? As we mentioned, status ailments that stop your enemy have become more valuable than ever. Strong attacks like vortexes that have always been important are more important too, for the same reason, they stop your enemy. But then we have some interesting ones like the debuff, which never mattered before because you can only hit one wave of enemies with the debuff. However, now we're going enemy to enemy. In fact, we have to kill enemy to enemy. Anything that can make them weaker, it'll impact their attack by 33% and their defense lower by 33% is amazing for us. And if you have a character like this with Diminisher, that's fantastic. Now, it's a range character here, so he won't get any damage on the debuff since that's counted as a melee attack. But there aren't that many great range human side units. Obviously, you have somebody like Quincy Ichigo, Tech Ichigo, as a main, but as a side unit, Shinji may work. The fact that he has ailment reversal means there is a way that he can get some health back without having a status ailment like Drain. So, and he does quite a bit of damage on his strong attacks. Yes, having the 18 mag isn't ideal, but I would say this Shinji's kind of interesting. He may work with some builds. Obviously, the big debuff characters are some of the NAD characters. We're going to look at those in a second. I mean, other debuffs just off the bat would be like this Range Baragon. Where are you, buddy? Range Baragon, right here. He's got a debuff on his second. Again, they're range characters, so you're missing damage when they inflict the debuff, but I think it's worth it as a power-up for your other characters. Okay, so let's take a look then at this debuff. And the other thing, I'll just spoil it now, is going to be NAD characters. They have become incredibly valuable. But let's look at a couple of these debuff characters that I think are really worth it. Those are NAD boosters, which we're going to talk about here in a second. There we go. So the Tsukishima, the Askin actually has a use now because he also has a good Squad Zero killer. So that's interesting. Askin is going to be a melee Squad Zero killer that can do some work. I don't know if bringing these guys into PvE content will mean anything to you, but oh, I can't bring in Askin. Wait, let me see if there's any content where I can bring them all in. Oh, you know what? I could do this like Burn the Witch thing. All right. He doesn't have killer, but he don't need it. He don't need it. Doesn't need killer. Okay, so we'll check out the strong attacks, talk about why each of these are important. As I mentioned, NAD characters have a big buff because they do a lot of single target damage, very consistent damage, especially the AI, the way it works. You're better off using NAD characters. So this Tsukishima is a huge asset. First of all, he's got like a 90% bruiser built in. He also has the 50% extra killer effect in Guild Quest, and then he has the 30% extra melee damage in Guild Quest. So this guy's doing a lot of damage. I will say, in general, for NAD units, the most important thing now will be getting that attack stat high, even more so than the insane multipliers like this guy has. Like, I only have 1 out of 5. But what we're here for is his debuff, and he has a surrounding vortex debuff, which, again, is going to be a little bit like the 960 into 630 homing vortex. It's going to stop those enemies in place, so that's an added value. He also has drain, which means his survivability is pretty high. So this melee Squad Zero killer right here is very valuable. I was so fortunate to pull him from tickets. He's going to be integral to your team, I would think, in Guild Quest. So again, 90% bruiser with all the extra bonuses in Guild Quest, that's great. The second character is this Ulquiorra. He has been great for a while. The fact that he has, this is amazing. For range captain, as soon as Bambi came out, I was like, man, I'll never get to use this Ulquiorra. But now, this Ulquiorra is the king of range Guild Quest. You've got Bambi to do damage, but he's going to debuff and give you a multi-barrier. And then, in addition to having his crazy high bruiser, he's got a high bruiser, I think full stam, at full stam it's like 100%, but he also has the increased damage in Guild Quest. So just adding an extra little perk. And then he has Weaken, so even as a status ailment, that'll help you do more damage. So, you know, this Ulquiorra is the king. And then finally we have Askin, who, with his start barrier, gives him a little extra survivability built in, and then he's got the debuff attack. He only has a 30% bruiser, however, he's an older character. If you have him 5/5, I would use him even over this Tsukishima right here, even though this Tsukishima has a lot more damage, ostensibly. Getting that attack stat high is going to, again, be more valuable than just having a high bruiser. It's just the way the calculator works when you're fighting a high defense enemy. It's for that reason that some older characters may have an edge over a newer character that should be doing tons more damage, but isn't because, again, they don't have a high enough attack stat if you don't have dupes into them. So those are just 3 of the best debuff melee characters, debuff NAD characters, I meant to say. So, of course, they're going to be among the best that you can bring to this Guild Quest. And then in the case of all 3 of these also have wonky killers, making them incredibly valuable. I may have messed up on Askin's killer. Let me double check. Squad Zero. Melee Squad Zero. So he's actually competing directly with this Tsukishima. But if you don't have... You know what? You could use them both. Because 1 or 2 of them are going to die. When they die, they get all their strong attacks back. That means you're just going to be constantly debuffing. So that's not bad. If you don't have a boost especially, you could bring in both Askin and that Tsukishima. No problemo. Now, the second group of characters that got a major buff are just NAD characters in general, especially those with a boost barrier. Now, all 3 of these have boost. No, well, except for... you know what? I'm going to bring in the character for which I have a preset loaded up. Well, it looks like it's going to be this Soiphone. So this character too, and so you got boosts, right? That have a big thing. Barriers, even if you only have a barrier without the boost, that'll be pretty valuable as an SP, as a NAD character. And then finally, it'll be down to the Self Vortex. Self Vortex, again, Like any vortex that can trap them temporarily will add a ton of value to your Guild Quest run. This is kind of like it was during Hard Guild Quest, except that they've added an additional Guild Quest, making killers even more important than they were. So she doesn't have a surrounding vortex, but again, boom, multi-barrier on her boost, very valuable. Give her some last ditch, and that means, you know, that's the other thing I gotta mention. Even if it's you got one booster covering your team, if you have two boosters you can bring in, for example, for range no affiliation, you could bring in Momo, and you could bring in this Misaki. It's worth doing so, because when they die, they're going to come back and use the boost. And again, the most important thing will be to get that boost activated. So they will boost themselves, at least, giving themselves more damage, again, getting that attack stat higher, which is beneficial. Unless you have a 5/5 unit and you're thinking about like a 5/5 unit with 500 attack versus a 2/5 unit with a boost skill. In that case, I would just go with the 5/5 unit. Otherwise, go with the booster. Just because that attack that they'll have when they revive is very important to have that high. Even more so, again, than SP characters, the boost is important for these Nat characters. All right, finally we got Aizen. I mean, he is the god. Are you kidding? This guy has the 80% attack boost and a gauge mechanic. So nobody's going to top this Aizen in GQ right now, even though he only has a 60% bruiser and he doesn't have any additional damage to characters in Guild Quest. The fact that he can get 80% extra attack, and he has a multi-barrier, and he has a gauge mechanic, makes him the king, the absolute king of the new Guild Quest. So if you have him for Ranger Rancor week, you're in good hands. Now, if you don't have him, there are thankfully quite a few other Ranger Rancor NAD characters that you may have duped out. Even the Kisuke, even though he doesn't have a boost on his second strong attack, he's okay. And you could run somebody even like the Power Nemu to get a boost barrier. And the Kisuke, again, it's going to be like this Misaki. Not having multi-barrier is going to hurt you just a tad, but, you know, you may not have that multi-barrier on an older unit. So these characters too, big buff and power. And I think the other salient theme here is just adding survivability. Having this, look at the Soy Punch. He also has paralysis. So that's going to proc a couple times and really save your ass, especially if you're resetting a good amount. So yeah, now that I think about it, it's not so complex. It's, can you keep your enemies in place? Can you boost up your stat to get around defense? And you can do that either by boosting or diminishing their stats. And, you know, can you somehow increase your attack potency, your attack stat, so that you can bypass their high level of defense? That's it, really. The good news is that a lot of these key GQ characters are, in fact, premium characters. Let's go back and check that out. So a lot of these characters, let's see, like the key characters, obviously the Burn the Witch characters that I don't have are key characters in my opinion, but actually most of them are outside. Like, for example, this is for sure a great character to have for the GQ, but you have strong options you could use if you don't have him. You could use, for example, this Uryu, who is a premium unit, and maybe even a better option. He's got the gauge attack, which is really critical, as I mentioned, and he's got, you know, pretty high Frenzy 2 Berserker 40 with a debuff on his special. And that debuff, by the way, will be the most valuable thing, I think, in this GQ. Because if you can't, you won't be able to bomb necessarily an entire boss by yourself, especially if it's the last boss. If it's an early boss, you might be able to do it with a 5/5 character. But I've tested it. A 3 of 5 Noelle with attribute advantage doesn't fully bomb the last boss. But if you debuff them, then they're going to be melted by your side units. So this plus weaken defense on an Uryu, amazing. So Uryu's stock has risen quite a bit too. He also has the double killers. Man, that Uryu, I only have him 3/5. I wish I had him 5/5. This Yama, speaking of characters, booster skills are more valuable. He also has paralysis, and he is a melee captain killer. Who needs the help? Yes, you have Yachiru, but who do you have for side units? You got this Yama. So this Yama, who I also don't have, is also very valuable now in the new GQ. So honestly, I like how this has changed. You'll notice I don't have many of the characters whose value has risen a lot in the new GQ. This Kisuke, by the way, on Range Soul Reaper is amazing because he also has the paralysis, and he's still going to do as much damage as, say, 7th Annie Ichigo is as a side unit. So that is a very good character. And this Raruka, as a final thing, is also another character whose stocks have risen. She has a range Quincy killer, and we don't have that many good range Quincy. Remember, you do have Balgo in there helping you out. You have another big one I know I'm missing. But for NAD units, it's really her. So if you have her, that's fantastic. She's a 65% built-in bruiser, together with weaken on her flurry, on her NAD string, and her NAD attacks do 4 hits instead of 2, which is kind of annoying sometimes because it pushes the enemies just a bit. However, it's great for proccing status ailments. So Raruka, not a bad call for GQ, and I have her 2 of 5, which is good enough for me. Yeah, that's really where we're at, guys. Unfortunately, some characters like Artbook, I think at this point have been pushed out of Guild Quest. If it's all you have, then a 5/5 character like him at least has his SP stat high enough to do some damage, but because his bombardment can't nuke anymore, and it definitely can't nuke now, he's just left with a 60% Berserker with, with a status ailment, weaken, which is okay. But if he had paralysis and weaken or something, it might help him a bit. And if he had weaken defense instead of bombardment, it would help him even more. Yeah, but that's just how it is. Jujiro is obviously another character I should have brought in. He's got the multi-barrier with a boost. He's going to be very beneficial. You'll run him with like Tech Quincy Ichigo perhaps as a main because it's range hollow, but we have a lot of good range hollow characters. There are some other status ailments like slow, like this Shuhei has, that might actually have some use. Slow and lacerate, even if they don't keep the boss in place, they will prevent them from dishing out that heavy damage against you, just slowing them or preventing them from using strong attacks. Yeah, that's it, guys. That's really who we have, what we're left with. I'm pretty excited to continue to see how close I can get, even though I don't have many of the ideal characters. Like, I don't even have this Rukia, although, you know what? The fact that 1000-Year Blood Horizon exists means you don't really need a booster character. You can just take him with his boost barrier. Even though he doesn't have booster, he'll do the job. And then the only other spiritual pressure attack character we have is this Ulquiorra, who remains a very good character. Even if you only have him 1 out of 5, he will occasionally get that attack boost. So if you reset a lot, he'll do the work for you. He has Drain, so he can heal himself a bit. And then in addition to only having a 40% NAD bruiser, he does have the increased damage in Guild Quest and the increased killer effect in Guild Quest. So he remains a very good NAD unit, even though he doesn't have a way to stop characters and he doesn't have a boost. He bypasses the need for those 2 criteria, which I argue the most important and probably hurt this Captain Gin just a bit. He bypasses them because he has the the attack 80 boost. And then this guy is not bad. I use my speed Orihime, but for the range Soul Reaper week, he does have paralysis, and that's going to really help him be a good NAD character despite not having a boost. Wow, we covered a lot of ground, guys, but, we have some interesting characters to try out now. The meta has absolutely shifted in Guild Quest, and, if you don't have some of these key characters, just think of me. I don't have any of the Burn the Witch characters. I don't have the Yachiru. I don't have this great melee Espada killer. So there are going to be some weeks, some of the Squad Zero weeks, for example, and the melee Espada week where I'm going to be in a ton of trouble. The only reason I'll be able to clear range Espada week is this beauty right here, this Ulquiorra, who again becomes super valuable, not for his nuke this time, but simply for the fact that he has the Vortex as well as the status ailment boost. So, Vortex characters in general just keep getting better. It's almost unfair for the other characters. I will close off, and I already mentioned this earlier, but I am interested to see if characters like this Tensa, if you have them 5/5, as well as the Ichigo, can do enough damage with some side units that don't have status ailments to actually bring down some of these Guild Quest waves. The reason they didn't before is because they didn't have nukes, so we didn't use them as main runners, and we'd always use a nuke that had a status ailment, so it made no sense to bring in a character that did damage to enemies without status ailments. But now, where strong attack damage is all that matters, it could be, if you have these characters max transcended, that they can do enough strong attack damage together with some strong support characters to bring down or get through Guild Quest. So I will be doing a test video where I look at using this Ichigo as a main with a non-status ailment team, and then I compare him to somebody like the Uryu, which may not be fair. He may be just strictly better, I would assume, but we're going to see how that works out. They both shared this. They're both melee Arrancar no affiliation characters, so that Uryu may just be strictly better for Guild Quest, but we won't know until I try. And it could be that having that consistent extra damage with this guy makes up for the fact that, he doesn't have a debuff on his special and he doesn't have a gauge attack. All right, our gauge mechanic. That's it. Very long video. I hope it was interesting for some of you. I will do a video for each guild quest. Even if I can't clear it, I'll show you how close I get. I feel like I must be one of the more relatable people posting videos on YouTube in terms of my account not being crazy like Aranieros or Death Smasher or Spiteful Hopes. They all have crazy accounts. My account is okay. I do have some max transcendent characters, including this Bambi who I just got, but I don't have enough to, clear each week. So I don't know. If I can do it, you can do it, I'm sure. I mean, I've been playing for years, so I have a pretty good account. But if you've been playing consistently too, if I can clear it, I think you can clear it. Obviously, my Bambi's going to help me in Range Captain Week, but for all the other weeks, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good one. I'll see you on the next one.